Random House Audio presents The Lost Sisterhood by Anne Fortier. Read for you by Cassandra Campbell. Amazons, mythical race of female warriors. The name was popularly understood as breastless, maza, breast, and the story told that they pinched out or cauterized the right breast so as not to impede their javelin throwing. Amazons have been used as evidence for an actual matriarchy in prehistoric times. This has seemed an attractive counter to modern male prejudices, but mistakes the nature of myth. The Oxford Classical Dictionary. He who controls the present controls the past. George Orwell. Prologue. The young men completed their training row in record time. It was one of those rare bright mornings in Oxford, when the mists lifted off the river right before the bow, as if nature had waited for this moment, this crew, to finally unveil herself. Hawes felt invincible when he and his mates walked back to college together, crossing the Christchurch meadow in the rising sun. But his elation was cut short by the college porter, who summoned him to the lodge with a brusque wave as soon as the young men entered the quad. "This came for you, sir." The porter pointed an ink-stained thumb at the object sitting on the mail counter. "Not 10 minutes ago. I was just about to call the dean." "What is it?" asked Hawes, stretching to see. "And where?" But his voice broke off as soon as he discovered the contents of the canvas hamper. For nestled on a cushion and covered with a blanket lay a sleeping baby. Hawes was unable to come up with any appropriate English words to express the sudden chaos in his brain. He had seen infants before, certainly, but had never expected to find one so small in the dank lodge, surrounded by mail bags and forgotten umbrellas. "Indeed, sir." The porter drew up his woolly eyebrows in awkward sympathy. "But perhaps this letter—" He handed the young man an envelope that was attached to the hamper by a string. "Will provide an explanation." Part 1. Dusk. Chapter 1. 9 days, then, I was swept along by the force of the hostile winds on the fishy sea. But on the 10th day we landed in the country of the lotus-eaters. Homer, The Odyssey. Oxford, England, present day. In her own obscure fashion, my grandmother did what she could to arm me for the carnage of life. Stamping hooves, rushing chariots, rapacious mails. Thanks to Granny, I had it more or less cased by the age of 10. Alas, the world turned out so very different from the noble battleground she had led me to expect. The stakes were puny, the people grey and gutless. My Amazon arts were futile here. And certainly nothing Granny taught me during our long afternoons of mint tea and imagined monsters could buoy me for the currents and crosswinds of academia. On this particular October afternoon, the day it all started, I was knocked down by an unexpected gust of wrath halfway through a conference paper. Prompted by the almighty Professor Vanden Bosch in the front row, the discussion leader sprang to her feet and drew a cowardly finger across her throat to let me know I had precisely 0 minutes left to finish my lecture. According to my own wristwatch, I was perfectly on time, but my academic future depended on the favor of these distinguished scholars. To conclude, I stole a glance at Professor Vanden Bosch, who sat with his arms and legs crossed, peering at me with belligerent eyes. It becomes clear that despite all the graphic descriptions of their mating habits, these Greek authors never saw the swashbuckling Amazons as anything more than fictitious, quasi-erotic playmates. A rustle of enthusiasm went through the auditorium. Everyone had been sodden and rather glum coming in from the rainy quad earlier, but my lecture had clearly done its bit to warm up the room. However, I nodded at the discussion leader to assure her I was almost finished. The knowledge that these bloodthirsty female warriors were pure fiction did not stop our writers from using them in cautionary tales about the dangers of unbridled female liberty. Why? I panned the audience, trying to count my allies. Why were Greek men compelled to keep their wives imprisoned in the home? We don't know. But surely this Amazon scaremongering would have served to justify their misogyny. As soon as the applause had waned, Professor Van den Bosch short-circuited the discussion leader by standing up and looking around sternly, mowing down the many eagerly raised hands with his gaze alone. Then he turned to me, a little smirk on his venerable face.
"Thank you, Dr. Morgan. I am gratified to discover that I am no longer the most antiquated scholar at Oxford. For your sake, I hope the Academy will one day come to need feminism again. The rest of us, I am relieved to say, have long since moved along and buried the old battle-axe."
Although his charge was disguised as a joke, it was so outrageous that no one laughed. Even I, trapped behind the lectern, was too shocked to attempt to riposte. Most of the audience was on my side, I was sure of it, and yet no one dared to stand up and defend me. The silence in the room was so complete you could hear the faint plunking of raindrops on the copper roof. 10 mortifying minutes later, I was able to flee the lecture hall at last and retreat into the wet October fog. Drawing my shawl more tightly around me, I tried to visualize the teapot awaiting me at home, but was still too furious. Professor Van den Bosch had never liked me. According to a particularly malicious report, he had once entertained his peers with a fantasy in which I was stolen away from Oxford to star in a girl power TV series. My own theory was that he was using me to ruffle his rival, my mentor, Catherine Kent, thinking he could weaken her position by attacking her favorites. Catherine, of course, had warned me against giving another lecture on the Amazons.
"If you continue down this path of inquiry,"
she had said, blunt as always,
"you will become academic roadkill."
I refused to believe her. One day the subject would catch, and Professor Van den Bosch would be helpless to smother the flames. If only I could find time to finish my book, or, best of all, get my hands on the Historia Amazonum. One more letter to Istanbul, handwritten this time, and maybe Grigor Resnick's magic cave would finally open. I owed it to Granny to try. Scuttling down the soppy street, my shirt collar up against the elements, I was too preoccupied to notice someone following until a man caught up with me at the High Street crosswalk and took the liberty of holding his umbrella over me. He looked a sprightly 60, and was certainly no academic. Underneath his spotless trench coat I spied an expensive suit, and I suspected his socks matched the tie.
"Dr. Morgan,"
he began, his accent betraying South African origins.
"I enjoyed your talk. Do you have a moment?"
He nodded at the Grand Café across the street.
"Can I buy you a drink? You look as if you need one."
"Very kind of you." I checked my wristwatch, but unfortunately I am late for another appointment. And I really was. Since it was recruiting week at the University Fencing Club, I had promised to pop by after hours to help demonstrate the equipment. A convenient arrangement, as it turned out, since I was very much in the mood to lunge at a few imaginary foes.
"Oh!"
The man proceeded to follow me down the street, the tips of his umbrella stabbing at my hair.
"How about later? Are you free tonight?"
I hesitated. There was something unsettling about the man's eyes. They were uncommonly intense and had a jaundiced tint to them, not unlike those of the owls perched on top of the bookcases in my father's study. Instead of turning down the dark and mostly deserted Magpie Lane, I stopped at the corner with what I hoped was a friendly smile. "I'm afraid I didn't catch your name."
"John Ludwig. Here."
The man rummaged around in his...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?